It was just another evening in NYC, until one moment made it unforgettable. The night New York refused to sleep was the night she stopped running from her own reflection. It was raining in sheets, the kind of relentless rain that blurs the skyline and turns every streetlight into a trembling halo. The city pulsed with sirens and taxi horns, neon signs flickering against the wet pavement like broken promises. She stood at the edge of the sidewalk in Manhattan, her coat soaked through, her hands trembling not from the cold but from the weight of everything she had been carrying for years. She had come to New York to disappear into the crowd. She never imagined it would force her to finally be seen. Before we step into her story, take a moment. If you believe in kindness, in second chances, and in the quiet miracles that happen when we least expect them, like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel. Your support keeps these stories alive. Her name was Alina Rahman, 26 years old, with tired brown eyes that once sparkled with impossible dreams. She had moved to New York from a small town upstate, chasing ambition the way so many young people do. The city had always looked magical from a distance, its skyline a symbol of reinvention. But up close, reinvention demanded sacrifice, and sacrifice had taken more from her than she ever planned to give. Alina worked long shifts at a publishing agency near Times Square, a job that sounded glamorous when she described it to her parents but felt suffocating in reality. She spent her days editing manuscripts she wished she had written, correcting other people's stories while her own remained unwritten. Every evening she returned to her tiny studio apartment in Queens, microwaving dinner and scrolling through social media, watching former classmates celebrate engagements, promotions, milestones. She felt stuck in a life that looked fine from the outside but hollow within. That night had begun like any other. She had stayed late at the office, trying to impress a supervisor who barely noticed her existence. When she finally left, the sky had already cracked open with rain. She descended into the subway, only to find delays stretching into hours due to flooding. Frustration rose in her chest like a storm of its own. She surfaced back onto the street, deciding to walk part of the way, her heels splashing through puddles. As she crossed an intersection near Central Park, she saw him. He was sitting on a bench beneath a flickering lamppost, drenched, his thin jacket clinging to his frail frame. An older man, perhaps in his late 60s, with silver hair plastered to his forehead and a paper cup by his side that held only rainwater. Most people hurried past him, umbrellas tilted low, eyes fixed forward. In New York, invisibility was common currency. Alina almost walked past too. She had her own problems, her own exhaustion. But something made her slow down. Maybe it was the way he wasn't asking for anything. Maybe it was the way he stared at the rain as if it were washing away memories he could not afford to lose. She approached him hesitantly and offered her umbrella. He shook his head gently, a faint smile appearing on his weathered face. His eyes were startlingly kind. They reminded her of her grandfather, who had passed away the year she moved to the city. A sudden ache tightened her chest. She didn't have much cash, but she had her time. Without fully understanding why, she sat down beside him on the wet bench. The rain softened into a drizzle, and the noise of traffic faded into the background hum of the city. He told her his name was Samuel. He had once been a music teacher in Brooklyn. He had a daughter he hadn't spoken to in years after a misunderstanding that grew into silence. He had lost his apartment after medical bills swallowed his savings. The city that once echoed with his students' piano scales now echoed with his loneliness. Alina listened, truly listened, for the first time in months. She realized how long it had been since she had heard a story not crafted for social media, not polished for approval, but raw and human. When he asked her about herself, she hesitated. Then the words poured out. She confessed her fear of failure, her regret about leaving home, the guilt of pretending she was thriving. She admitted she felt invisible too, just in a different way. The rain stopped completely, leaving the air cool and electric. For a moment, two strangers shared a fragile honesty beneath the dim city lights. What happened next was small, almost ordinary, but it shifted something inside her. She invited him to the 24-hour diner across the street. She bought him a hot meal and dry coffee. They sat in a red vinyl booth, steam rising from their cups. Samuel spoke about music as if it were oxygen, about how he used to tell his students that every wrong note was just a step closer to the right one. Alina felt those words settle deep within her. Before they parted, he pressed a folded piece of paper into her hand. It was a worn sheet of music, edges frayed, notes scribbled in pencil. He told her it was a melody he had written for his daughter years ago, a song about forgiveness. He said he carried it as a reminder that it's never too late to try again. When she walked home that night, the city looked different. The skyscrapers no longer felt intimidating. They felt like witnesses. She clutched the sheet of music to her chest as if it were a lifeline. The next morning, something had changed. Alina called in sick to work for the first time in 2 years. She spent the day thinking about Samuel, about the way his eyes lit up when he spoke of music. She searched online and found a local shelter near where she had met him. She called them, described him, and learned he sometimes came by but often left before securing a bed. They encouraged her to bring him in if she saw him again. For days she returned to that bench after work. The first 2 evenings he wasn't there. Doubt crept in. Maybe he had moved on. Maybe she had imagined the connection. On the third night she found him, shivering beneath the same lamppost. This time she was prepared. She brought him a warm jacket and gently insisted he come with her to the shelter. He resisted at first, pride flickering in his eyes, but eventually agreed. She stayed through the intake process, filling out forms when his hands shook too much to write. When she finally left him in a clean bed with dry blankets, she felt a quiet warmth spread through her. Helping him did not solve her career uncertainty. It did not erase her fears, but it gave her clarity. Over the following weeks, Alina began volunteering at the shelter every Saturday. She listened to stories that were heavy and heartbreaking, stories that forced her to confront how narrow her world had become. She realized she had been measuring her worth through promotions and praise, when perhaps it could be measured through presence and compassion instead. She also began writing again. At night, instead of scrolling through curated lives, she opened a blank document and started drafting a story inspired by Samuel. She wrote about a fallen music teacher and a young woman lost in a city of millions. She poured into it her own loneliness, her guilt, her longing for connection. The words flowed as if they had been waiting for permission. One evening, months later, Samuel handed her a letter. He had reached out to his daughter through a social worker at the shelter. She had responded. They were planning to meet. His hands trembled not from cold but from hope. Alina felt tears blur her vision as she realized that the melody of forgiveness was finally being played. That night in New York had not been dramatic in the way movies portrayed transformation. There were no flashing lights, no grand rescues. It was simply a bench, a storm, and 2 souls brave enough to pause. But that pause rewrote her path. A year later, Alina stood in a small independent bookstore in Brooklyn, holding the first printed copy of her debut novel. It wasn't a bestseller, not yet. But it was real. The dedication page carried a single line, "For the man who reminded me that every wrong note can lead to the right one." Samuel was there, sitting in the front row with his daughter beside him. Their reconciliation had not been instant or perfect, but it was sincere. Watching them together, Alina understood that healing is rarely loud. It is quiet, persistent, and deeply human. If this story is touching your heart, if it reminds you of someone you've met or someone you need to forgive, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who believes in compassion, and subscribe for more stories that matter. And before we close, I have a special request for you. Comment the word hope below if you believe that even the smallest act of kindness can change a life. Because what happened that night in New York did not just change Samuel, it changed her. It taught her that success without connection is empty, that ambition without empathy is fragile, that sometimes the universe interrupts our routine not to derail us but to redirect us. She had come to the city chasing a dream of being recognized. Instead, she found something far more powerful, the courage to recognize others. New York continued to roar with life, with ambition, with heartbreak and possibility. But for Alina, the noise no longer felt overwhelming. It felt like a symphony, each person a different instrument, each story a different note. And she finally understood that her role was not to compete for volume, but to add her own melody with honesty and heart. So the next time you find yourself rushing through your own storm, remember her. Remember that a single decision to stop, to listen, to care, can ripple outward in ways you may never fully see. The night she sat beside a stranger in the rain, she thought she was offering help. In truth, she was receiving it. And in a city that never sleeps, two hearts found a moment of stillness that would echo for a lifetime.